Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so glad you're with us today. The more Craig Hogan, and you know, of course, who he is, and I and a number of others have been researching and coming to better understand the greater reality of which this entire physical universe is just a small part, the more completely we've come to see that what we experience as human consciousness is in fact the base creative force that continuously manifests all of reality. That force is an energy-like potentiality that exists in a range of vibrations, from the lowest, which is fear, anger, hatred, every other ishy emotion, to the highest vibration, which is perfect love, happiness, all of the happy emotions. Emotions are, in other words, not just an artifact of being a human being. They are the very force that continuously manifests everything you see around you. And the primary reason why we keep entering lives in this material reality is, and this may in fact be the only reason the universe exists, is so that we can learn how to work against negative emotions and toward positive emotions. That's why we come here. That's why we keep coming. And eventually we will learn enough and grow enough spiritually to be able to get beyond it. I have told you before, you can make this your last earth lifetime, or you can continue for another 1,000 lifetimes. It's really up to you how you use this lifetime well. And part of what we do here is talk about how to do that. Now, you know that I use the teachings of Jesus. Since the churches don't use them, I use them. And what we found is they may be the easiest, certainly they're the oldest. They may be the most effective way, too, to raise your spiritual vibration, but they're not the only way. There are Eastern methods which work extremely well. And I've gotten to the point where I want to know what those Eastern methods teach us and how we can use them in a comfortable way. So I've had some guests, as you know, in recent months who've talked about Eastern religious practices and how we can use them to raise our vibration. And today, for the first time, I'm going to show you someone who uses those methods and gets to exactly the same place where Craig and I and so many others have basically arrived, using the teachings of Jesus, which to me is extremely exciting. I'm very, very happy that we finally have found someone. I knew it was possible, found someone who does exactly what I had hoped someone would be doing with these teachings. So our guest today, I'm trying to think, how can I make this big enough? I should have a little trumpet here. Our guest today, sorry, there she is Dr. Alison Kay. This is just a little blurb about her. She's very widely educated and widely traveled. Oh my goodness, you wouldn't believe. And she's an energy practitioner and natural healer. That's how she books herself. She's going to focus on helping people thrive in mind, body, and spirit. She studied subtle energies and ancient wisdom in Asia. She was there for 10 years. Talk about studying it. She lived it. And for years, she has taught yoga, meditation, other aspects of what she has learned with a specialized focus on energy medicine, mind-body fitness, holistic health, and the chakra system, which I zealously avoid. But she has done all of those things, and it sounds big, but where she has arrived is just where I spoke when at the start of this program, what I spoke about. All that exists is this energy which we experience as consciousness. That's all that exists. It vibrates very slow and low in the negative energies. It vibrates very high. She calls it joy. I call it love. It's the same thing. We have done nothing together, she and I, till today when we have had our first giggle. But she's been doing this her whole life, and she's arrived at the same place using entirely different sources. There, I rest my case. If you can come at the same truth from so many different directions, then it is truth indeed. So I'm very excited about this. She says her special mission is to support the next higher evolution of the collective and create changes for the health of the planet and those who are ready to unleash every part of the magic that is within them. Amen to that. She's created what she calls the vibrational upgrade system, and she hosts an Activate Your Magic monthly program, which is synced with the potency and support of the moon. Oh my. She asked me when this would be running, and I told her when it was, and she said, oh, so it's just after the equinox or some such thing. I said, fine. I don't even realize there is really a moon out there. She also offers what she calls group clearings and activations, all these wonderful things that many people need, and I can't give them. But here's someone who comes from the same kind of understanding who can. Her signature program is called Magic Manifestation and Money Flows, my goodness. And she tells us that it facilitates bonuses, huge life-changing events in all those areas. She offers her more advanced clients her vibrational upgrade mastermind group, a certification program, and international retreat programs. And this is not even her latest book. She was telling me ahead of time she has one later, so we'll have to do that at another session. The book we're going to talk about today is called Reasonable Dragons, How to Activate the Field of Possibilities Where Logical Magic is the New Normal. I love that title, Reasonable Dragons. I mean, they all should be reasonable. Shouldn't we all be reasonable? But I love the book. It's short. It's to the point. It's easy for Westerners to read and understand and not be put off by. And it arrives pretty much exactly where we have arrived in using the teachings of Jesus to try to understand reality. We're seeking reality here wherever we can find it, and here she has come to the same place. So I am thrilled to be able to welcome today the wonderful, wonderful Alison. Welcome. I'm so glad you're with us. This is going to be so much fun.
Hi, Roberta. I am just in awe. So, hi, I'm Dr. Alison Kay. That's the full name.
We're already on first name basis here.
I can totally see what you said that about Reasonable Dragons being the right book for you to have read after what you just said in the intro. So what do you want to ask?
Well, I hardly know where to begin, but most times when we have a new guest, people like to hear what brought you to this place? What made you get started? I mean, you've spent your whole life doing this research. Why? Why the heck?
Oh, I love it. Okay. So I'm age 12 or so. I'm out back on our swings with my mom, and she says to me, Alison, you have such a natural ability to understand people. You should consider going into psychology. Just briefly, this is important because you talked about this in your intro, Roberta. I'm going out in the woods every day after school with my older brother. I have two younger brothers, too. To the point that we'd be out in all the woods and around my house. My mother would have to ring a cowbell when it was dinner time. And I know that might sound archaic, like who lives like that anymore? I'm not that old, But when we were out in the woods, my brother would jump on the already broken tree limbs, and I'd be just connecting with everything, just feeling like I was home and seeing the aliveness in interacting with the trees and the leaves that were in the breeze and the critters skidding above the stream or the creek, however you want to refer to a smaller, less than river body of water. And like on the ground or the floor of the forest, the clovers and the critters like that just go along the red floor of the forest. And so I never felt disconnected. It was like an enhancement. And so then in my teen years, I started to, later on in my teen years, write in a journal, and nobody suggested that. It was just like this natural inclination, and it was a way for me, I learned later, and as I taught later and still teach this, the journal writing was a way for me to bring forward my higher self's voice and connect guidance more. Yeah. So those two things were happening prior to becoming a psych major. Very connected, very intuitive, and bringing it, and having a tool already to know how to bring through that guidance. And my guidance told me by the third semester as a psych major, this doesn't get it. Everyone,
as you're hearing this, you're thinking guidance. You're saying, well, how come she gets guidance? I don't get guidance. We all do. The difference is that Alison, very early in her life, learned to pay attention to and listen to her guidance. You've been guided from the moment you were born. You have a guide, and maybe many guides who are taking care of you and love you, and they also are helping you to live out a life plan. She planned this before she was born, and it's clear to me, seeing you, I sort of identified with it actually, because I read your story, and you sort of kept playing dodgem cars with things. You were trying things, and then they weren't quite right, and then you were trying something else, and you gradually zeroed in on this wonderful, wonderful course that you've taken. And anybody can do that, though. I want everyone to know that that's not something that just happens to certain people. It happened to me, too, but only because I was also paying attention. As I keep telling people, I mean, this is all Thomas's work. I just sort of come along for the ride. Sorry, go ahead. I get you. I identify with you so much just because your journey looks like my journey. And I've seen very few people who have been as obsessed to follow this very unusual journey that each of us has been on independently, you and I both.
Yeah, it is. It is unusual. And I know that I never took a course. I have found it important in the last year. My guidance has been really strong, my intuitive voice that I know not to listen to, because like the few times in my late teens or early 20s that I listened to it, chaos or mayhem still resounded. So
Yes.
pretty early on, I was aware, like, okay, this is a good thing, this voice, and don't go against it, because wow, what you have to pick up afterwards.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So so it was hard for me not to follow it, basically, because I knew better pretty early on.
Right.
Yeah, and so I pieced together this all. You're right when you say that I tried things like the psych major, and then looking. So what I ended up saying was, you're not teaching me to the psych department how to be the happiest, most thriving version of ourselves. And instead, you're teaching about capitalistic application of the psych.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And, it was just too heavy. It wasn't about thriving. And I had that sense, that connection to presence of spirit, of all that permeates the life force, that permeates all of life, behind the trees, behind you, behind Sam, behind me, behind any listener out there. So I was already connected to that sense of there's something behind life that allows
Yes.
it to exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. I had a voice speak to me when I was 8 years old out of a light. And I knew from that moment on there was something, as you say, behind it, something behind the curtain, something more that we can't see. And that's what you discovered too. I mean, it's just such a parallel journey. I love it.
Yeah, it really is. And so I wanted to know what it was. So fast forward, I worked politically in campaigns to get people elected. So graduating my bachelor's, I moved out west, ultimately with a degree in English Lit. So I was studying society, politics, mass communications, and humans psychology through an art form. English Lit and creative writing had been my focus. I moved out west from the East Coast of the United States to go for my master's in that. And I wrote stories instead of taking the GREs to get in. And so while I waited for the news to come in about me getting in, I had synchronistically had this job offer to go and work as a political consultant and organizer for getting people elected to both the state and federal level who were going to not just vote for protecting the earth, but write legislation that is environmentally conservatively geared. So I thought it was extremely logical. I loved what I was doing. I was so passionate about it. I rose up through the ranks like a rocket. So I was stressed. They would put me in more and more intense races. I was in the state of California. So during the primaries, I helped get the first Latina woman elected to the California State Assembly, who ended up saving the last patch of green space in the LA basin. And so, I mean, that was the plan. We get people elected who are going to, conserve the planet. So when it came to general elections, I was totally needing some tool. I had already taken yoga in college. I was already going to the Chinatown in San Francisco, already reading the I Ching. So I already had in my undergraduate school itself had like a Buddhist pagoda hidden out in the woods that I only found out about starting, I think, in sophomore year. The first Westerner or American to write about mindfulness came out of my undergraduate school. So I had influences, bringing in that Eastern influence. And then I moved to San Francisco and spent a lot of time in the Chinatown. So I was walking through a bookstore, regular bookstore, not in Chinatown, and this purple book fell off the shelf, landed at my feet, and of course I wasn't. Yep.
This is how your guides get your attention. I've got stories like this too.
Yeah, if you're doing it proactively, I say this a lot. Like people need crisis in order to. Yeah, so we won't get into that quite yet. Okay, so the book's on meditation, and so I picked that up immediately and start doing it. And I had the hubris, because it was some might call it hubris, but it really was such a natural fit. Like, it was very familiar to me, meditating, that I ended up teaching it like within a year and a half after learning it. Not quite that soon, but it feels like it was that soon. It's probably like within 5 years. Okay, so I leave the campaign season's over. I had done that job for a couple of years and wanted a break. And I traveled overseas, came back to the States afterwards after living in a couple of different locations for a couple of different months at a time.